Coming up on Tower Talks, students weigh in on the University of Mississippi making moves to remove their state flag from campus, and this past weekend's Texas Tribune Festival. All this and more coming up on Tower Talks.
Good evening and welcome to Tower Talks. I'm your host, Cassie Pollock. And to my left, I have
Zach Bowen
with
the College Republicans.
And Joseph Trahan with the University Democrats.
And well, it was a very busy weekend, not only here in Austin and not only in Texas, but nationwide. The biggest news today is that Vice President Joe Biden formally announced he will not be running for president in 2016. At 12:10 Eastern Time, Biden entered the White House Rose Garden with his wife and President Obama by his side, saying that the window has closed for him to run a successful campaign for president. So, Joseph, tell me, what does this mean for the Democratic Party? Does it help or hurt them?
I believe that it actually helps the Democratic Party because when you consider Joe Biden running for the presidency with Hillary Clinton, both are considered to be more moderate within their party. Both are establishment and both have a track record of servitude to the United States. So I think that it would have further divided it and it would have been more difficult to try and have someone come out on top.
Okay. Zach, your thoughts?
Well, I have two thoughts on this one. I think even though he could have fared better in the general election, his actual odds of getting past Hillary in the primary were next to nothing. So in the end, he probably would have just dragged it out for her, and the majority of his support is going to go to her, I think, the polling shows. So whether or not it helps the Democrats, I'm not entirely sure, but it definitely helps Hillary Clinton.
Okay, cool. So let's talk more about more news happening in Washington, specifically with House leadership. Since Kevin McCarthy dropped out from his U.S. House speakership election, Paul Ryan's name began quickly circulating as to who should be running for the top leadership position in the House. After a couple weeks of denying the claim, Ryan told reporters Tuesday night that he would consider running for Speaker, but only if certain conditions of his were met. Current Speaker of the House, John Boehner, who announced his resignation last month, has set the Speaker election for October 28th, the same day as the third GOP debate. Okay, quick question for you. Do you think that the election that Boehner set, the election day that Boehner set, has anything to do with the GOP debate that's going to be going on?
I don't think
Any
so.
correlation whatsoever?
I don't think so. I think it has more to do with Ryan's deadline and his desire to get this out of the way as soon as possible. I think his thoughts are, if I can't get 100% support from all the various factions in the House this quickly, then I don't want the job to begin with, because this is just going to be a crazy, hectic experience anyway. And I think you're seeing a guy who isn't necessarily in search of the job to begin with, so unless he can get it all wrapped pretty nicely in a bow, he doesn't really want it.
Okay. And Representative Daniel Webster from Florida is still running for Speaker of the House, and he has the backing of the Freedom Caucus. Do you think that when it gets down to it, Ryan's going to be taking the victory for the House speakership, or do you think we're going to see someone else come in and take it?
Well, if Ryan intends to, stick to his guns, so to speak, and trying to receive full support, then obviously he's not going to get the speakership. As far as the man from Florida that you brought up, having that support from a very conservative base, I think will help him due to the fact that, there is a lot of conservatism that exists within the Republican Party today. I mean, we saw that with issues ranging from same-sex marriage to opposition to Planned Parenthood. So I think that it's not a clear win. I think it's going to be a very difficult, hard-fought battle for whoever the speaker is going to be. Okay.
And speaking on Planned Parenthood, that organization took another blow as Texas announced on Monday its plans to cut Medicaid funding for the organization, and it follows from a series of videos that was published by the Center for Medical Progress. And Governor Abbott told Fox News yesterday that the Inspector General for Medicaid in Texas uncovered several legal violations by Planned Parenthood. According to Abbott, among them were altering abortion procedures for fetal tissue, unsanitary conditions, and Medicaid fraud for unnecessary billing purposes. A similar situation has happened in Louisiana, where Governor Bobby Jindal cut Planned Parenthood from Medicaid funding, but a federal judge ruled that the state must continue funding for another 14 days. Planned Parenthood has already announced their intentions to pursue legal action. And in fact, Joseph right here has started a petition online. Tell us about that.
That's right. So I created the Facebook page called Stand with Planned Parenthood in Texas, and it involves a petition trying to receive support in opposition to eliminating funding for Planned Parenthood by means of Medicaid. I believe that this is an important issue that needs to be addressed. We're talking about the health care and the quality of health care for thousands of Texans across this state, specifically low-income Texans. And so I think it's of vital importance to get UT students involved, and this is just the beginning. The petition is just laying the groundwork.
Perhaps what's not being talked about as much is, even though Governor Abbott comes out and announces that, hey, we're going to be cutting this, Planned Parenthood, to an extent, still receives funding. And is it from federal dollars or is it from state dollars, even though it's not coming from Medicaid?
Well, the issue with funding is, regardless of whether they're receiving funding or not from a different source, the main focus is Medicaid and the people who rely on Medicaid to receive health care. So when you cut from a program like Planned Parenthood, who has thousands of Medicaid patients visiting their facilities and their affiliates every year in Texas, it's important to recognize that even though, which is what Governor Abbott had mentioned about somehow justifying his reasoning by saying that there are other facilities that they can go to, the problem with that is that these facilities do not have the occupancy, for the most part, nor the available workload to intake the influx of the thousands of patients who are now being forced out of Planned Parenthood, which is their provider of choice, that it's being taken away from them.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts on this?
I am a part of the 25% of Republicans who don't support defunding Planned Parenthood, so I can't necessarily represent the party on this issue, but what I would say is I think they might have jumped the gun a little early on defunding at the state level, because we haven't really gotten any results back from the various investigations, and despite, whatever your opinion is on this issue, I think maybe we should at least wait till we get that information back before we go forward.
Joseph, in his petition, says that he refers to Governor Abbott's move as a Republican crusade against Planned Parenthood. And, part of that comes from the fact that Center for Medical Progress released these 10 videos. So are you saying that we need to wait till further validity and truthfulness is shown in the videos?
Well, there's two separate investigations going on.
Correct.
Well, actually, several different investigations going on in
multiple
different states. One is being run by the House, I think, and we have our own in Texas. All I'm saying is that you can't necessarily make broad conclusions about the entire organization based off what's in these videos. You may be able to make claims about individual Planned Parenthood locations. I think we should wait till these investigations give us something more conclusive before we move forward with anything else.
Well, so one of the Planned Parenthood videos out of the series of 10, one of them was shot and filmed in the Houston location of the Planned Parenthood, one of their outlets. And what do you think of the videos? They're saying, hey, look, there's some procedures that are not legal, that do not comply with state and federal law. Are you still thinking that these videos just aren't very truthful, and it's just so skewed by such a, anti-abortion group?
I believe that you have to put into question the validity of any organization that makes its intent very clear of trying to eradicate a particular program such as Planned Parenthood, and I don't believe in the validity of those videos.
Okay. So on to our next topic. Stay tuned, because we still have students reacting to something that's going on at the University of Mississippi and their state flag, and they're trying to get that banned from their campus, and last weekend's Texas Tribune Festival. Please keep right here on Tower Talks. So Tuesday night, students at the University of Mississippi, their student senate, voted to remove the state flag from the campus. They basically said, the student senator who wrote the resolution told the Associated Press that if we're claiming to respect the dignity of each person, that flag cannot fly on our campus. So we talked to students here at UT to see what they thought with recent Confederate happenings.
The Confederate flag is a lot of history behind it, especially in the southern states. Even here in Texas. But I think it's the right thing to do.
But the Jefferson Davis statue is a good example. You think about what the university stands for, and what place does this have at the university?
It's a symbol of a long-standing history of oppression, and that it should be removed on a campus that has all types of people on it.
I think it needs to go up to the state level too, that it doesn't really make sense that that's still their state flag. I know that they're the last state that hasn't removed it. I mean, I think they need to get with the times.
Well, people kind of just have the freedom, to express themselves whatever way, or it's definitely seen in a negative way a lot of times.
But I have to say, when you raise a flag up in the air, it's a different story than just having the flag in a museum.
So Zach, we seem to be having a lot of discussion about Confederate flags and statues. Jefferson Davis gets removed from UT's campus earlier this year. Do you think that what's happening is something that needs to be happening on a wider scale, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think in the historical context of how all these statues and things came about, and the flags, a lot of it happened in the 19-teens and 20s when we were trying to reconcile the South with the North, and it was a part of this whole, let's consolidate as a nation movement. I think what we're awakening to now is that we don't necessarily need that anymore to feel consolidated as a nation, and it carries bad historical references that I don't think the majority of Americans are comfortable with. I think all of these different institutions need to examine whether this is something they're comfortable with and make a decision for them if they want to continue having these flags and if they want to continue having these statues.
So one side of the argument is, okay, yeah, it's very racially divisive. It reminds us of something that we don't want to be reminded of. And then the other side, people who had grandparents, great-grandparents, whatnot, fighting and being involved in movements that, stood for this Confederacy, they're saying, hey, it's a part of my heritage, it's a part of my history. Why would I want to erase that? So I want to turn to you, and I want you to kind of tell me what you think about this. Do you think that what's being done is the correct thing that needs to be done? Do you think it's erasing history? What do you think?
I don't at all believe that it's erasing history. I mean, there's a reason why we have museums. However, I don't believe that we should be glorifying the ills of our past through statues, which I was really happy with student government here taking that initiative to have it removed. And also with the flag, I mean, for a state to still have a Confederate flag, as a part of its, it's really difficult for me to understand. And it's interesting because this really brings up a broader conversation about the importance of youth getting involved and showing that our generation is not, so connected or, holding on to those past ills. I mean, it's really something that I think we need to move past, and this is going in the right direction.
But do you think that maybe this means something else to different people than what it means to us? I know for me personally, I don't associate with a lot of aspects of Southern culture, so I don't really get the Confederate flag thing. But in some of these states, they might honestly have an idea of the Confederate flag that's different than ours. It might mean something beyond a war over slavery. So that's why I think maybe we need to be making this on a case-by-case basis and wait till there's a tipping point in different institutions.
That can definitely be argued, but the same thing can be brought up with people who are Nazi sympathizers who had a viewpoint that, even still today, that Hitler had the right view, and that, people still try to revere him and his decisions, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's okay or that it's right, just because there's an opposing viewpoint or a different perception as to what the intent of our past discrepancies throughout history have been. I think that it's important to recognize that for the most part, regardless of how you feel about the Confederate flag, it does symbolize a point in our history that justified slavery, that justified human rights violations on a mass scale, that justified separating families, and that's what it represents to many people within the African American community. And I think that that should really be taken seriously.
I agree. I just think maybe we need to wait till an institution as a whole has a majority of people who want to take it down. I don't think we can wholesale decide what different things mean to different people,
right? I don't
and
think
just make
one piece
macro
of
decisions.
legislation
But I don't
or
think
one
that's what we're
action
talking about.
is going to change.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
We definitely need to go in the right direction.
Yeah.
Both very good points. Now, when we come back, we will be discussing early voting in Texas and the annual Texas Tribune Festival that took place here at UT this weekend. Well, with early voting beginning in Texas this past Monday, voters will be able to cast their ballot now through November 3rd for 7 new amendments to be added to the state constitution. In the 2011 and 2013 elections, 8 of the 10 and all 9 amendments were passed and added to the Constitution, respectively. But voter turnout isn't doing too hot here in the state, with the 2013 election having only 6.7 voter turnout rate. The Tribune's Ross Ramsey puts it pretty bluntly, calling this election the kind where big changes can float right past the unwitting electorate. So let's take a look at those 7 propositions. Proposition 1 involves property tax reduction. Proposition 2 is about disabled veteran tax exemptions, counting for spouses. Proposition 3 is repealing capital living requirements for statewide officials. And Proposition 4 is about professional sports teams, charitable foundations can having more raffles. Honing in on Proposition 1, that would basically be increasing property tax exemptions for Texans, saving Texas homeowners around $126 a year. And then moving to the second batch of those propositions, you have Proposition 5, involving small counties can perform private road maintenance. Proposition 6 guarantees Texans the right to hunt and fish. And Proposition 7 means more state revenue to the state highway fund, basically allowing for more state taxes to be collected from car sales for the state highway fund. So let's go back to the low voter turnout rate, which I know is kind of a pressing issue. Tell me what you think. Why is voter turnout rate here in Texas so low?
I believe that the voter turnout here in Texas is so low for a number of reasons, one of which is that many people feel that their vote doesn't count. They feel that as long as corporations and big oil here in Texas has a handle over the governor's office and over the House and Senate here, that no matter what they try to do, it won't make a difference. I think that also there is a big issue when it comes to people trying to use religion to justify being, per se, a Republican versus a Democrat, and possibly making people feel that ashamed of identifying with the Democratic Party and trying to be vocal about it. Because a lot of people try to be really quiet. I don't know if you noticed, I come from a small town. Nobody talks about being a Democrat there.
I would agree on a couple of those points, but mostly I think this is driven by demographic factors, and most importantly, the fact that in a couple of decades, Texas has turned into a one-party state. In 2013 and 2014, going for several years now, the Democrats have not even been fielding candidates in an overwhelming number of races. It's almost like you guys have given up on the state.
We haven't given up. In fact, we saw in 2014 with us, with Battleground Texas, and with the Travis County Democratic Party raising over $1 million to support local candidates here in Austin, we also supported Wendy Davis. The issue is not that the state of Texas is Republican. The issue is that it's a non-voting state. We have a low voter turnout, so of course old white male Republicans are going to maintain power because, I mean, that's just how it is. When you are not motivated from a number of factors, not simply just your party trying to entice you or persuade you to vote, but also in influences, and like I spoke about before, as well as the pressure to not speak up for your values out of fear of being, basically shunned, which is what a lot of people experience, like myself, in small towns, which make up a lot of the rural population.
So you say fear of being, speaking out and kind of voicing your opinions, but you don't see a lack of that here at the university level, do you? Here at UT, I mean, it's people kind of say what they want, don't really.
I think that we saw a lot of people being vocal here, students and faculty, with Campus Carry, and I was very happy to see that. However, I believe that there is a lot of voter apathy within college-aged individuals. I feel like people are more concerned in our generation with what Nicki Minaj says to Miley Cyrus at an award show rather than real issues like individuals losing quality access to health care or people not having the ability, before, to marry who they wanted to marry, and things like that I think are more pressing.
Okay.
I would just say, back to my earlier point, you guys with Wendy Davis and everything, I would completely agree. You guys put a lot of money into that race and a couple other races in the state. But you guys are effectively running national elections at the state level. You're not appealing to the average Texan that's far more conservative than the average American citizen. The reason we're so successful is we're marketing a product specifically to Texans. You guys are running like this is New Hampshire, and it just completely turns the whole state into a one-party.
I think what the Republican Party runs on in Texas is misinformation, and they try to justify by getting a hold on the Southern Baptist and other religious right. to encourage them to say, if you vote Republican, you're doing God's will. And that is something that is a real reality. And studies will show that that is something that is being used by a number of officials within the Republican Party here in Texas.
But it sounds like to a certain extent what you're saying is the voter is stupid and we're just pulling the wool over
The
their
voter
eyes.
is being misinformed,
I
not
think that
stupid.
these people honestly believe in a lot of conservative values that maybe make them a little bit to the right of the nation as a whole, but you guys aren't marketing yourself as a Texan
I would tend
party.
to agree with that more if we had more of a voter turnout, if we had more than 10% of the voting population voting in elections. And a lot of that has to do with voter apathy and the feeling that, again, people's issues and rights are not going to be taken into consideration, that people are going to focus on the continuance and the perpetuance of conservative values. And it goes back to the fact that Texas, for the most part, is filled with a lot of rural areas. And when you have rural areas, you have a lot of dominance with religious institutions. You see the biggest cities in Texas who tend to be blue. And I think that says a lot about, it's a lot about information. People at UT are more informed on current affairs than people, let's say, in my hometown of Beaumont, Texas.
Well, I mean, nobody's forcing these people into these churches, though. And nobody's, I think you're overstating when you say that what's driving this all is low information. Back in
Well,
1988,
also influence
you
with
guys had
corporate
Ann Richards
corporations.
elected. That
Right.
was not that long ago.
We did, but you also have to look historically. When George W. Bush ran against her, he had far more funding from his father and big corporate sponsors to push an agenda to make it seem like Ann Richards was not the best choice. Because under Ann Richards' administration, she went from being in the red to being in the black when she left office. And in fact, under her administration, she was able to bring together more diversity within the Capitol than ever seen before. She made strides and she made a difference. The fact of the matter is influence, money, religion, and misinformation.
But would you not agree that there is a huge policy divide between Ann Richards in 1988 and your most recent gubernatorial candidate? I mean, there's a huge divide. You guys are running a center-left campaign in one of the most conservative states. And it's not just voter turnout, because they do polling that hits a lot more people, and it shows that it reflects a conservative state.
I guess I'm looking at different polls.
Okay. Well, we are not done just yet. Both good points and conversation from my two panelists. Keep it right here for our social media sign out. Campus last weekend, Texas politicians, students, and the public gathered for the 5th annual Texas Tribune Fest. Conversations about immigration, gay rights, and gun violence brought legislators from all over the country. And new at the festival this year was a Snapchat live story. The partnership with the social media platform and the Texas Tribune was created to engage students and people around the city.
We're all about trying to find ways to engage people with the content and the panels and the parties. And so most of that, if you're not here in person, takes place online. So we enable that through a lot of activities, through live streaming, through Snapchat, through Twitter, trying to make it so that people both here and people who can't make it to Austin can engage.
Okay, so we have Snapchat going on. Super big thing at the festival this year. Did y'all go, by the way?
I did.
Too expensive.
Yeah, college students. Okay.
Yeah.
So, what kind of a role do you think we're going to see Snapchat play in this upcoming 2016 election? I mean, all the candidates seem to have it. You know, someone running their Snap story. Do you think it's going to play a big role?
Well, I think it's already playing a huge role, and I think this is a way to try and increase interest within the millennial generation within politics, because you can look at your Snapchat story and see, I mean, people that are tracking the Republican National Convention and the Democratic National Convention and the debates, and it's just a really good thing, I think, for our society.
Do you agree or disagree?
I'm a social media dinosaur, so I'm not sure if it's helping as a matter of fact, but I hope it is, because as he's saying, there's far too many young people who don't care about serious issues.
Very true. Well, thank you so much to our guests, Joseph and Zach, for joining us in studio tonight, and thank you so much for tuning in. For political updates throughout the week, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and email your comments to towertalksut@gmail.com. I'm Cassie Pollock, your host, wishing you all a great rest of your evening.